Capital. Also with us, Brandon Arnold. He's the Executive Vice President of the National Taxpayers Union. Good morning, gentlemen. A lot to react to from President Trump. And also, we just heard from Jamie Dimon, the CEO of JP Morgan Chase. It's interesting. While I agree with what he's saying now, he seems to be singing a different tune, especially as he debanked so many Americans, including President Trump. They allege that he debanked them, rather. I want to get your perspective on all of this, Brandon, given that he's talking about taxes.
Yeah, I mean, I think Jamie Dimon is right here in that people don't want to see these higher taxes that we've seen in these European welfare states. We don't want to bring those types of policies into the United States. And a lot of states that are experimenting with higher taxes, like California and certainly New York, have paid a heavy price for that in the terms of population departure, people moving to Texas and Florida and North Carolina and other low or no tax states. So yeah, absolutely. It's very encouraging to see the CEO of one of the largest companies on the planet embrace the very tenets of free market capitalism, which is keeping tax rates relatively low and embracing this free market system that has made the United States the most powerful country in the history of the world.
You know, let me just kick this off by saying, I'm a fan of Jamie Dimon ever since I worked at Smith Barney, where he and Sandy Weil put together Citigroup, the largest financial services firm in the world at the time. So hearing Jamie talk about lowering taxes and bringing back common sense, well, not back, but actually bringing common sense to D.C. to get all these different factions of the American economy working together, and that's what President Trump is doing. But we do have these little pockets, these governors and local officials wanting to raise taxes. Well, how do you see this playing out in the American economy over the next several years under President Trump's leadership, Anthony?
So it's funny, generally the blue states are not only overspending and mismanaging their budgets locally at a state level, but they're looking for money to supplement that irresponsibility from the federal level. So as President Trump breaks that system, right, and President Trump really puts a noose around the neck of those governors and those mayors and those local and state governments, what I would see is that we're going to have a lot of stress within the financial systems state by state, and then we need that pain and that destruction of the system to actually grow out of it. So what I'm basically saying is sometimes you need to break it in order to fix it, and I see that as President Trump's mantra, because that's the position we're in. We've gone so far down this hole as far as fiscal irresponsibility that it needs to just break in order to fix it. California being the poster child for fiscal irresponsibility, social irresponsibility, and the what not to do as far as being one of the 50 states. But that's basically how I see it. This needs to break before we can fix it. And President Trump's role is to let it break and then put the proper fix in place.
Let me just say, I'm all for breaking California.
There needs to be a complete and total reset, of course. But also in Davos, Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, he shared his thoughts on globalization.
Globalization has failed the West and the United States of America. Why would Europe agree to be net zero in 2030 when they don't make a battery?
Such a good point, Brandon. We heard a lot about energy independence, the windmills, and all the problems with Europe. But going to Davos and criticizing the globalist agenda, that takes confidence. So your thoughts on his comments?
Yeah, I mean, I think you talk about energy independence. That is such a key for the affordability crisis that's facing Americans right now. And generating more electricity, building the infrastructure that we need to transmit that electricity, that is absolutely critical to this country's financial well-being as well as our national security. So it's no surprise that Trump and Trump administration officials are going to Europe and pointing out some of the many, many mistakes that Europe has made in this rush, this ideological rush to green energy that is completely contrary to the realities of the needs of the European economy. We cannot make those same mistakes. We cannot follow Europe into the mess that they've created for their businesses and for their families. And it's very reassuring to see Trump telling the truth and Trump administration telling the truth to European leaders on that front.
You know, Anthony, I would venture to say that you are a free market capitalist, as I am. But Howard Lutnick, the Secretary of Commerce, said this: export offshore to find the cheapest labor in the world, and the world is a better place for it. Well, you know what? Here's the situation. He doubled down and said that did not work out well for the American people. Why? Because jobs were shipped off overseas to try to find the cheapest labor. Now, that is a very good economic tool in the financial toolkit, but the way going forward, that is not America First agenda. America First agenda is bringing back many of the manufacturing and jobs that went overseas by lowering taxes, making it better to do business here. So do you see that as a shift in the economic and financial thought that many business people have been used to over the last several decades?
Yes, there's definitely a shift. Look, I remember in 1997 trading in the garage on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange and getting a memo from Grasso, who was the CEO at the time, buying into this globalization of markets, globalization of business. Everyone was sold a bill of goods, and everyone bought into it, from the politicians down to the CEO of the New York Stock Exchange. And we on the trading floor all got that memo, and it moved out into the equity markets and abroad. The bottom line is this. We need to shift towards cheaper labor, better labor, more consistent labor within the United States, not abroad. And that is for economic security, that's for national defense, that's for supply chain control and security, all of the above. Finding cheaper labor, finding more efficient ways to do business is great, but we've learned a lesson. That needs to be within the borders of the United States. Oh, and by the way, those need to be sovereign, secure borders, and this needs to be done for the benefit and with the thought of the American worker, not the worker abroad. That's the direction we need to go. That's the direction we've been in, aside from this 30-year stint of globalization, and I think we've all learned our lesson.
We need to cut what you just said and send it down to Congress immediately.
Please.
Well, also at the World Economic Forum, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, he spoke about the Supreme Court case involving President Trump and his attempt to remove Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook from the board.
In terms of the Supreme Court hearing, I believe, I'm not sure whether it's today or tomorrow, Jay Powell has announced he's going to attend. And Joe, I got to tell you, I actually think that's a mistake, because if you're trying not to politicize the Fed, for the Fed chair to be sitting there trying to put his thumb on the scale is a real mistake.
It does seem like a lot of politicking from Jay Powell when you're sitting at the Supreme Court, basically in support of Lisa Cook. What do you make of his comments there, and what could this ruling entail for the future of the Fed? Brandon.
Yeah, I mean, I do think Fed independence is quite important. I do think you need to have a firewall between the political apparatus, the administration, and the Fed to preserve that independence here. But yeah, I mean, we're going down a really unprecedented path when you see the combative relationship of Donald Trump and the Trump administration and the Fed chair. And obviously that'll change this year when we do appoint a new chairman. We'll see who that is. But for the time being, you know, it is a little concerning to see, and we've seen a lot of market jitters as the result of this competitive, combative relationship between the two. I don't think that's good for markets. I don't think that's good for the economy. So they need to find a way to kind of hold hands and get along in the short term until we are able to appoint a new chair of the Fed.
Well, in closing, take a look at this chart showing gold prices over the last year. Now, gold prices are climbing fast, and it's now approaching $5,000 an ounce. What does this mean for the economy, the U.S. dollar, but most importantly for investors, Anthony?
Yeah, gold's been an incredible asset. It's one of the 5 that we trade here in our commodities basket, and it's been a great performer, up about 50% since last June. I think what we're seeing here is the incremental buyer of government and sovereign debt has gone away. That buyer has now shifted on a global basis into precious metals and gold in particular, with the fear of geopolitical risk, with the inflation that we've seen and potential reigniting of inflation, which may happen. It's definitely a hedge, and it's definitely the asset of choice here in a reversion away from sovereign debt, which is way overdone.
Brandon, I only have 10 seconds. What's your response?
Yeah, I mean, the answer here is obviously to get rid of some of this sovereign debt here. We need to pay down our national debt. We can't afford to run $2 trillion deficits year in and year out. Drive down the debt, cut spending, and I think that'll help stabilize markets and certainly address the affordability crisis as well.
Absolutely. Lower debt and lower taxes. Love both of those initiatives. Thank you so much, Anthony and Brandon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
You got it.